Okay, so get ready for this. There's this story straight out of New York City about Barron Trump, the former president's son, and he ends up helping this elderly woman who collapses right in the middle of a crosswalk.
Wow.
Pretty crazy, right? Like in the middle of all the hustle and bustle.
Yeah, in a city like New York, you see all kinds of things.
Exactly. So at first glance, you might think, okay, nice gesture, but there's actually way more to it. Like it gets deep into second chances, family stuff, and like how one act of kindness can have this crazy ripple effect. It's pretty wild.
You're totally right. It's not just about the act itself, but the whole context surrounding it. You've got Barron Trump, someone who grew up with privilege and security,
Yeah.
choosing to help someone most people would probably just ignore in that kind of situation.
Exactly. Like his background definitely adds another layer to the whole thing. And get this, some of the sources describe the crowd's reaction as a mix of like skepticism and surprise. Some people were even like hesitant to help.
Really?
Yeah. And then Barron steps in.
Huh. That's interesting. It makes you wonder about that whole bystander effect in a big city like New York. Like, are people so used to just, like, the chaos that they become kind of numb to people who need help?
Right. It's a good question. And the source material actually mentions this thing that the woman, Lillian, said, I was going to see my son. Turns out she had been estranged from her son, Michael, for like 15 years. She was trying to reconcile with him, and she was actually carrying this old, faded photograph of them together when she collapsed.
Wow, that photograph detail is
I
powerful.
know, right?
It speaks to the emotional weight she was carrying, the urgency of what she was trying to do. It makes you think, did Barron pick up on that desperation, or was he just reacting to someone in need?
It's hard to say, but the account goes on to say that he didn't just stop at helping her up. He had his security detail actually try to find Michael while she was being treated.
Seriously?
Yeah, like he was determined to make sure she was okay.
That's incredible. There's like a level of persistence there that's pretty remarkable. It kind of challenges that whole idea of just a fleeting act of kindness. He's actively trying to fix the situation. It's going way above and beyond a typical good deed.
Totally. It's like he becomes this like unexpected catalyst for a potential reconciliation, something that Lillian might not have been able to do on her own.
Yeah, for sure.
But finding Michael is just the first hurdle, right? Can you imagine the tension, like waiting to see if they can even find him? And then if they do, will he even want to see his mother after all this time?
Oh, absolutely. You have to remember, this is a story about these two individuals, Lillian and Michael, with their own complex past and emotional baggage. Barron, by stepping in, is basically forcing them to confront a past they may have been actively avoiding.
You're so right. And they each had their own reasons for the estrangement. The news report doesn't really go into detail, but there's definitely a lot left unsaid.
Absolutely. And that's where the whole thing shifts from a simple act of kindness to a deeper exploration of human relationships. The sources say they finally found Michael at this auto repair shop where he works. Can you imagine his reaction when Barron's security detail shows up?
Oh, I bet he was totally caught off guard.
I can't even imagine.
Well, according to the report, Michael was super angry, resentful. You can practically hear the years of hurt in his response. Like, she made her choices, I made mine. It's like he built up these walls to protect himself from more pain.
That kind of response is pretty common in these kinds of situations.
Yeah.
That feeling of being abandoned, whether it's real or just perceived, can be so deep. It's like a defense mechanism, a way to cope with all the emotional turmoil.
Makes sense. So, did Barron just give up?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
He keeps trying to get Michael to at least go see his mother at the hospital to give her a chance. He even says to Michael, "Don't you think she deserves the chance to try?"
Wow, powerful words.
Right. It's like he's reframing the whole thing, shifting the focus from Michael's pain to Lillian's vulnerability. It's this subtle but powerful nudge toward forgiveness. Like he's acknowledging that people can change, even if their past actions have caused pain.
It's like he's challenging Michael to look past the past and consider reconciling. But that's a huge gamble, right? There's no guarantee that Michael will be open to it.
Oh, definitely. There are always risks involved in trying to reconcile,
Yeah.
but there's also the potential for a huge payoff. The possibility of healing old wounds, of rebuilding what was broken.
So does Michael end up going, does he go to the hospital?
He does, but it's not an easy decision. He hesitates, wrestles with his emotions, all that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It really shows the inner conflict he's going through. But something shifts, and we'll get into that after this.
So Michael's at this crossroads, right? All those years of just resentment, but then bam, this chance to reconnect with his mom. What do you think, like, makes him finally decide to go for it?
Well, it's probably a bunch of things coming together, you know? Like, you can't deny that Barron's persistence was a factor, but you also got to think about Lillian's condition. I mean, she's in a pretty vulnerable state.
Yeah.
And the news report kind of hinted that Michael's anger kind of gave way to, like, worry, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
He probably realized that if he didn't at least try, he'd regret it forever.
Oh, totally. That fear of regret. Right. Those what ifs that can really mess with you.
Exactly.
Okay, so he goes to the hospital, but then what? What happens when they finally see each other after, like, forever?
Well, it's definitely emotional, but it's not like instant Hallmark movie forgiveness or anything.
Right.
It's more like awkward, hesitant, like you can just feel all these unspoken things hanging in the air.
Heavy.
Yeah. But under all that, you can sense a little bit of hope, like a need for connection that's bigger than all the pain of the past.
Yeah, I get that. It reminds me of, like, research about forgiveness, how it's usually a process, not just a one-time thing. It takes time to work through all that hurt and build back trust.
Good.
So, do the sources say anything about, what they talked about, like what those conversations were like between Lillian and Michael?
Yeah, they mentioned that Lillian apologized. Something like, I never stopped loving you. I was just too scared to face the mistakes I made. It's raw, vulnerable. She owns up to her shortcomings, not trying to make excuses, but just acknowledging the pain she caused.
And admitting that fear, right, like that takes a lot of strength too. The guts to own up to your mistakes and risk even more rejection, especially after 15 years of silence.
It really does. And what's interesting is that Michael doesn't immediately fire back with anger or accusations or anything.
Mm,
He just kind of sits with her words, maybe recognizing like a shared humanity in her struggle.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So what, did he forgive her right then and there?
Not quite. But the source material mentions him eventually saying, I never stopped loving you either. I was just too hurt to reach out.
Wow.
It's like they're both admitting that love was always there, even though everything fell apart.
Powerful stuff. So that recognition, that's going to be huge, right? It's like a foundation to start rebuilding from. They're not just seeing each other through all the hurt, but as people who mess up, who are capable of love and forgiveness.
Exactly. It's a huge shift. They're moving from blaming to actually trying to understand their messed up history.
But understanding doesn't just magically erase the pain, right? There's still so much to unpack, like years of missed moments and things left unsaid.
Absolutely. Healing takes time. The news doesn't get into all the nitty-gritty details of their talks, but it does say they spent hours together, like reminiscing, sharing stories from the years they were apart.
Wow. It's like they're trying to bridge that 15-year gap little by little, reclaiming what was lost.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So did they talk about what caused the estrangement in the first place?
The sources are kind of vague on that. They focus more on the reconciliation part than the actual events that led to the split. But you can tell that both Lillian and Michael are trying hard to see things from the other's perspective.
And this is all because Barron stepped in. Like, he made this whole thing happen. He created this space for healing. But he doesn't overstay his welcome or anything, right? He knows this is ultimately their journey to figure out.
Totally. The story highlights Barron's last visit to the hospital before he heads back to his own life. He brings flowers for Lillian and a toolbox for Michael. Small gesture, but it says a lot.
Yeah, it shows he gets it. He knows he was the spark, but he's not the main character in their story. It's support without getting in the way of their, fragile reconciliation.
Exactly. And even though Barron steps back, the ripple effect of what he did keeps going. The news about his compassion got people talking about forgiveness, about second chances. It inspired others to reach out, to try to fix broken relationships.
It's amazing how one seemingly small act of kindness can snowball into something so much bigger. It can start this chain reaction of empathy and understanding, leading to positive change, everywhere, in families, communities, even society as a whole.
It's mind-blowing, right? And what's really interesting is how this whole story kind of goes beyond all the political stuff that usually surrounds people like Barron Trump.
I know, right? It's easy to forget sometimes.
It reminds us that beyond those labels, we're all just human, capable of both good and bad.
It challenges us to look past our judgments and see that shared humanity that connects us all.
Exactly.
So powerful.
And at the end of the day, that's what this story is really about. It's a testament to human connection, the chance for redemption, and the incredible power of even the smallest act of kindness.
Absolutely. So we left off with Lillian and Michael, like, just starting to rebuild their relationship, right? So all pretty fragile, super uncertain. What happens after they leave the hospital? Like, do they actually make it work?
Well, the sources don't get into every little detail, but they do paint a picture of, cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism.
Huh.
Yeah.
Like being in the hospital, that gave them a safe space to reconnect. But the real challenge is out in the real world, dealing with everyday life.
Right, right. All those pressures, the expectations, maybe even people doubting them because of, their history. Did they figure out a way to create a new normal for themselves?
There's this one line in an article that really stuck with me. Lillian, she says, we're taking it one day at a time. It shows they get it.
Yeah.
Rebuilding trust takes time, effort. They're not expecting some fairy tale ending.
That's smart. It's realistic, right? Knowing that forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it's a chance for a fresh start. So, did they fall back into old habits? Or did they break free from all that hurt that caused the estrangement in the first place?
The reports suggest they made a real effort to change how they communicated. They even started going to family counseling.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, shows how committed they are to fixing the stuff that led to the whole mess.
Big step. It means they're not just hoping for the best, but actually putting in the work. What about Michael? Did he ever let go of all that resentment?
Well, one source quotes him saying, "It wasn't easy, but I realized holding on to anger was only hurting me." It's a key part of forgiving, right? It's not just about the other person. It's about letting yourself off the hook, too.
Totally. Forgiveness as self-care, almost. It lets you move on without all that baggage. So what about Barron? Did he keep in touch with Lillian and Michael?
The reports don't mention anything about that. I guess he understood that they needed space to rebuild their relationship without, outside influence.
That makes sense. Mature move. He was the catalyst, but it's their story, right?
Exactly. Even though Barron kind of fades into the background, what he did keeps making waves. All the news about his compassion, it got people talking about forgiveness, second chances. It even inspired others to try to mend broken relationships.
It's amazing how one little act of kindness can have such a huge impact, Like a chain reaction of empathy and understanding, creating positive change everywhere.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
What's also interesting is how this story goes beyond all the political stuff that usually comes with someone like Barron Trump.
It's true. It's easy to get caught up in all that.
It reminds us that beyond those labels, we're all human, capable of good and bad.
Yeah. It challenges us to look past our judgments and see that shared humanity that connects us all.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, that's what this whole thing is really about. Human connection, the possibility of redemption, and the incredible power of even the tiniest act of kindness.
So well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's think about what this story makes us ask ourselves. Have we let anger or resentment hold us back from reconciling with someone we love? What small but brave things can we do today to maybe fix a broken relationship or help someone who needs it?
Because just like Barron showed us, even a moment of compassion can have a huge impact. It can ripple out and make the world a little kinder, a little more forgiving, a little more connected.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we'll leave you to think about the power of second chances and the extraordinary impact one person can have on the lives of others.